Welcome to Samurai Gaiden, the educational web series where I, Richard Shaffer, talk about the stories and anecdotes of the men and women of Sengoku Japan and the events that shaped their lives. Here in December, many will celebrate the Christian holiday of Christ's Mass, a celebration of the birth of Jesus of Nazareth in Christianity. This coming year will also probably lead to a celebration for Japanese Christians as the Vatican plans to perform a beatification of a martyred samurai. That's fancy Catholic speak for a type of formal acknowledgement of completion of miracles or martyrdom in the name of Christ. Latin for to make blessed. That samurai in question is the Sengoku daimyo Don Iustus, also known as Takayama Ukon Shigetomo. Shigetomo, as we'll refer to him for the duration of this video, was born Takayama Hikogoro, the son of a relatively small regional lord in Yamato province, Takayama Tomoteru. Tomoteru was the lord of Sawa Castle and served the Matsunaga family, whom you might remember from the Ashikaga Yoshitaro video as the main force behind the attack and murder of Yoshitaro. Tomoteru was an early adopter of Christianity and had his son, Shigetomo, baptized a year before Matsunaga Hisahide led the assault on Yoshitaro's mansion at Nijo. Shortly thereafter, the Matsunaga and the Miyoshi came to blows over how to puppeteer the new shogun, and the Takayama castle at Sawa was easy prey for the Miyoshi advance. The Takayama were now ronin, but got hired into the Oda forces through the good graces of another Christian daimyo, Wada Koremasa, who allied with Oda Nobunaga after he became Ashikaga Yoshiaki's patron to make him shogun. A few years later, when the Oda came to serious blows with Miyoshi, the Takagawa were stuck in the middle of things again. One of the Miyoshi samurai, Araki Murashige, besieged the Takayama castle, and their new master, Wada Koremasa, came to their aid. Unfortunately for the Takayama, Koremasa died fighting against Murashige's forces. Even with Koremasa's death, though, Murashige wasn't able to capture the castle. Once the initial war was over, the elder Takayama became one of the chief advisors to Koremasa's son, Wada Korenaga. Sadly for them, Korenaga didn't much like the Takayama clan. Korenaga plotted the murder of Tomoteru and young Hikogoro, now known by his adult name, Shigetomo. Tomoteru decided to make the first move, and he invited the young lord over to the Takayama home. Korenaga arrived with an armed escort, and this is where we first get to see young Shigetomo in action. You see, Shigetomo led a group of 15 samurai in a brutal assault on Korenaga's escort, and in the end, Korenaga was dead. During this time, the elder Takayama had been negotiating with Araki Murashige, who had recently defected to the Oda side. Murashige made no argument against the Takayama taking over the Wada lands, centered around Takatsuki Castle, and neither did their overlord, Oda Nobunaga. Most likely because Nobunaga had originally won over the Wada clan by supporting the Ashikaga shogunate, and this was the same year that Nobunaga chased Yoshiaki out of the capital and usurped his throne. 5 years passed by, with the Takayama ostensibly retainers of the Araki clan, until Araki Murashige led a revolt against Nobunaga. This was a very inopportune time for Nobunaga, as he had his forces spread out toward his borders and Murashige was in the middle of his realm. Nobunaga had also just completed blockading the besieged temple fortress of the Ishiyama Hongonji. If the Araki revolt wasn't dealt with quickly and efficiently, dissension could brew elsewhere in the Oda realm, and the Hongonji might actually be able to break the stranglehold on them. The stranglehold that it had taken Nobunaga years to plan and carry out. Murashige's home base of Itami was surrounded by several smaller castles which protected it from assault. Chiefly of these against Nobunaga were Ibaragi, held by a certain Nakagawa Kiyohide, and Takasaki Castle, held by our very own Takayama clan. Nobunaga had a Jesuit missionary brought to negotiate with the Takayama, knowing that both Tomoteru and Shigetomo were devout Christians. Nobunaga gave simple terms. If Takasaki surrenders, Nobunaga will aid the Jesuit churches in the area. If the fort doesn't surrender, then Nobunaga will wipe the churches out and expunge the Christian influence in the area. Shigetomo refused to endanger the Christian populace of Takasaki and fled the castle in the night. much to the chagrin of his father. Tomoteru sent messengers to Araki Moroshige apologizing for Shigetomo's lack of loyalty. Most likely because Moroshige currently held several members of the Takayama clan as political hostages. The Takayama were in an especially precarious situation when Shigetomo and his new priest friend went to Ibaragi and convinced the Castellan there, Nakagawa Kiyohide, to surrender to Nobunaga. In the end, Nobunaga was successful and Murashige's home of Itami was besieged and Murashige wound up fleeing his imminent destruction. To his credit, Murashige released the Takayama hostages unharmed, even with Shigetomo's betrayal. At that point, Nobunaga rewarded Kiyohide and the young Shigetomo. Kiyohide got to keep his castle at Ibaragi, and Shigetomo's father was forced to retire in favor of his son. Tomoteru shaved his head, denounced his Christian faith, and became a Buddhist monk by the name of Justo. This is ironic for two reasons. The first of which is that when Christianity first spread to the capital region, Tomoteru had been an ardent foe, trying to convince Matsunaga Hisahide to expel the Christians. The second reason you'll discover as we continue to talk about his son, Shigetomo. Now, Shigetomo owned Takatsuki, and he immediately set to work on converting the population to Christianity. Christian history applauds Shigetomo's work as just and holy. However, many Japanese at the time, and certainly now, believe that Shigetomo was basically a Japanese Tokumata. They believe that he forcefully converted the population of Takatsuki to Christianity. Shigetomo spent 5 years there in power, and in that short time, he converted 72% of the populace. That's 18,000 people to Christianity. That's a lot of willing converts. Especially taking into account the fact that Shigetomo reportedly looted and destroyed numerous Buddhist temples, converting the ones he didn't tear down into Catholic churches. Either way, it irked the local population of Buddhist monks, who petitioned Nobunaga to force an end to the conversion. Nobunaga had recently torched and murdered the entire populace of the Enryakuji temple complex, and was currently fighting 3 separate fronts of fanatical Buddhist warrior monk sects. Needless to say, he really didn't seem to care about what Takayama did to the temples in Yamato. Now, regardless of whether Shigetomo was just a brilliant sermon writer, or was actually holding a Japanese inquisition, he also managed to convert several other prominent men and women to Christianity, Kuroda Kanbei and Hosokawa Tadaoki's wife Tamako among them. Now we have arrived in the year 1582, when Akechi Mitsuhide betrays Nobunaga at Hanoji. Toyotomi Hideyoshi races back into the capital region, and along the way he passes through the province of Setsu, where both Kiyohide and Shigetomo have brought their armies, and they join the Toyotomi vanguard, eventually leading troops on the front line during the Battle of Yamazaki. When the Toyotomi and Shibata went to war later in the year over a succession dispute on which of Nobunaga's sons would succeed him, Shigetomo and Kiyohide were sent north to be the first line of defense against the Shibata. The Shibata lord, Katsuye, sent his nephew Sakuma Morimasa to make an opening break into the campaign. Sakuma attacked Shigetomo's post of Iwasakiyama, which Shigetomo apparently decided was an untenable position, and he abandoned the fort, fleeing to the castle at Tagami, where Toyotomi's half-brother Hidenaga was stationed. Sakuma went on to assault nearby Shizugataki, and eventually managed to kill poor Kiyohide, who was guarding it. However, this put Sakuma too far south compared to the rest of Shibata's army. Toyotomi counterattacked and defeated Sakuma, paving the way for Shibata's eventual defeat. Shigetomo is largely considered to have been a coward during this campaign. However, he may have been charismatic enough to convince Toyotomi that it was in his benefit in the end. After all, if Iwasakiyama hadn't fallen so easily, Sakuma might not have been so hot-headed and arrogant as to march all the way to Shizugataki and get taken by surprise. This is surprising given the fact that he was actually on fairly bad terms with Toyotomi at the time, because he refused to light incense at Nobunaga's funeral, citing the fact that Christians were not permitted to participate in the rituals of infidel religions. Either way, Shigetomo got the chance to redeem himself in 1584, when he participated in Toyotomi's invasion of Shikoku. He apparently performed well, and was awarded a fief at Akashi in Harima province, worth roughly 60,000 koku. As with Takatsuki, Shigetomo immediately went about tearing down or converting temples and converting the populace, and once again the cries of the local monks were ignored. That is, until after Toyotomi managed to diminish the power of the warrior monks in the capital region. something he had depended on Shigetomo to help with, and decided that Christianity was gaining too much ground in Japan. Shigetomo participated in Toyotomi's invasion of Kyushu in 1587, and before he even got back from helping to win that war, Toyotomi had him removed from his fief at Akashi and made a ronin. Shigetomo took up with the far more politically powerful Konishi Yukinaga, another Christian daimyo that was given a large fief in Kyushu. Shigetomo eventually wound up wandering his way to the Maida lands and took up under Maida Toshie, whose wife we talked about a few months ago, and remained there for several years, even after Toyotomi and Toshie's deaths. In 1614, when Tokugawa Ieyasu banished the Christians from Japan, Maida Toshitsuna, Shigetomo's lord at the time, believed he would be troublesome. However, in the end, Shigetomo acquiesced to the shogunate and boarded a ship to be removed from the country. He was exiled to the Philippines, where he was welcomed by the local Jesuit missionaries, and some reports suggest that he was offered the chance to lead a Spanish-funded invasion of Japan, but turned down the offer, instead opting to remain peacefully in Manila, which he did for the next 40 days, whereupon he died of illness. Shigetomo was, and still is, a polarizing figure in Japan. Christians laud him as a pillar of faith and heroism, and many others despise him as a cruel betrayer and a coward. Either way, he must have been well regarded by some back in his day to have accomplished all that he did. The conversion of notable samurai and their wives and servants, not to mention being welcomed into Maida Toshie's ranks, suggests that he was a skilled and well-spoken man. He is considered to have been good with poetry, and the tea ceremony as well. So, in the spirit of Takayama Dom Yusta Shigetomo, Merry Christmas for all you Christians out there, and a happy Rohatsu Day for everyone else.